Carlos Castaneda's The Teachings of Don Juan, a Yaqui Way of Knowledge. Part 1, The Teachings, Chapter 6. The next step in Don Juan's teachings was a new aspect of mastering the second portion of the Datura route. In the time that elapsed between the two stages of learning, Don Juan inquired only about the development of my plant. Thursday, June 27, 1963. It is a good practice to test the devil's weed before embarking fully on her path, Don Juan said. How do you test her, Don Juan? You must try another sorcery with the lizards. You have all the elements that are needed to ask one more question of the lizards, this time without my help. It is very necessary that Is it very necessary that I do this sorcery, Don Juan? It is the best way to test the feelings of the devil's weed toward you. She tests you all the time, so it is only fair that you test her too. And if you feel anywhere along her path that for some reason you should not go on, then you must simply stop. Saturday, July 29th, 1963. I brought up the subject of the devil's weed. I wanted Don Juan to tell me more about it, and yet I did not want to be committed to participate. The second portion is used only to divine. Is that so, Don Juan? I asked to start the conversation. Not only to divine, one learns the sorcery of the lizards with the aid of the second portion, and at the same time one tests the devil weed. But in reality, the second portion is used for other purposes. The sorcery of the lizards is only the beginning. Then what is it used for, Don Juan? He did not answer. He abruptly changed the subject and asked me how big were the Datura plants growing around my own plant. I made a gesture of size. Don Juan said, I have taught you how to tell a male from a female. Now go to your plants and bring me both. Go first to your old plant and watch carefully the watercourse made by the rain. By now the rain must have carried seeds far away. Watch the crevices made by the runoff, and from them determine the direction of the flow. Then find the plant that is growing at the farthest point from your plant. All the devil's weed plants that are growing in between are yours. Later, as you seed, you can extend the size of your territory by following the watercourse from each plant along the way. He gave me meticulous instructions on how to procure a cutting tool. The cutting of the root, he said, had to be done in the following way. First, I had to select the plant I was to cut and clear away the dirt around the place where the root joined the stem. Second, I had to repeat exactly the same dance I had performed when I replanted the root. Third, I had to cut the stem off and leave the root in the ground. The final step was to dig out 16 inches of root. He admonished me not to talk or to betray any feelings during this act. You should carry 2 pieces of cloth, he said. Spread them on the ground and place the plants on them. Then cut the plants into pots and stack them up. The order is up to you, but you must always remember what order you use, because that is the way you must always do it. Bring the plants to me as soon as you have them. Saturday, July 6th, 1963. On Monday, July 1st, I cut the Datura plants Don Juan had asked for. I waited until it was fairly dark to do the dancing around the plants because I did not want anybody to see me. I felt quite apprehensive. I was sure someone was going to witness my strange acts. I had previously chosen the plants I thought were a male and a female. I had to cut off 16 inches of the root of each one, and digging to that depth with a wooden stick was not an easy task. It took me hours. I had to finish the job in complete darkness, and when I was ready to cut them, I had to use a flashlight. My original apprehension that somebody would watch me was minimal compared to my fear that someone would spot the light in the bushes. I took the plants to Don Juan's house on Tuesday, July 2nd. He opened the bundles and examined the pieces. He said he still had to give me the seeds of his plants. He pushed a mortar in front of me. He took a glass jar and emptied its contents, dried seeds lumped together, into the mortar. I asked him what they were, and he said they were seeds eaten by weevils. There were quite a few bugs among the seeds, little black grain weevils. He said that they were special bugs and that we had to take them out and put them into a separate jar. He handed me another jar, 1/3 full of the same kind of weevils. A piece of paper was stuffed into the jar to keep the weevils from escaping. Next time you will have to use the bugs from your own plants, Don Juan said. What you do is to cut the seed pods that have tiny holes. They are full of bugs. Open the pods and scrape everything into a jar. Collect 1 handful of bugs and put them into another container. Treat them rough. Don't be considerate or delicate with them. Measure 1 handful of the lump seeds that the bugs have eaten and 1 handful of the bugs' powder, and bury the rest any place in that direction. He pointed to the southeast, from your plant. Then gather good dry seeds and store them separately. You can gather all you want. You can always use them. It is a good idea to get the seeds out of the pods there so you can bury everything at once. Next, Don Juan told me to grind the lump seeds first, then the weevil eggs, then the bugs, and last, the good dry seeds. When all of them were mashed into a fine powder, Don Juan took pieces of datura I had cut and stacked up. He separated the male root and wrapped it gently in a piece of cloth. He handed me the rest. He told me to cut everything into little pieces, mash them well, then put every bit of the juice into a pot. He said I had to mash them in the same order in which I stacked them up. After I finished, he told me to measure 1 cup of boiling water and stir it with everything in the pot. Then to add 2 more cups. He handed me a smoothly finished bone stick. I stirred the mush with it and put the pot on the fire. Then he said we had to prepare the root, and for that we had to use the larger mortar because the male root could not be cut at all. We went to the back of his house. He had the mortar ready, and I proceeded to pound the root as I had done before. We left the root soaking in water, exposed to the night air, and went inside the house. He told me to watch the mixture in the pot. I was to let it boil until it had some body, until it was hard to stir. Then he lay down on his mat and went to sleep. The mush had boiled for at least an hour when I noticed that it was getting harder and harder to stir. I judged it must be ready and pulled it off the fire. I put it in the net under the eaves and went to sleep. I woke up when Don Juan got up. The sun was shining in a clear sky. It was a hot, dry day. Don Juan commented again that he was sure the devil's weed liked me. We proceeded to treat the root, and at the end of the day we had quite a bit of yellowish substance in the bottom of the bowl. Don Juan poured off the top water. I thought that was the end of the procedure, but he filled the bowl with boiling water again. He brought down the pot with the mush from under the roof. The mush seemed to be almost dry. He took the pot inside the house, placed it carefully on the floor, and sat down. Then he began to talk. My benefactor told me it was permissible to mix the plant with lard, and that is what you are going to do. My benefactor mixed it with lard for me, but as I have already said, I never was very fond of the plant and never really tried to become one with her. My benefactor told me that for best results, for those who really want to master the power, the proper thing is to mix the plant with the lard of a wild boar. The fat of the intestines is the best, but it is not for you to choose. Perhaps the turn of the wheel will decide that you take the devil's weed as an ally, in which case I will advise you, as my benefactor advised me, to hunt the wild boar and get the fat from its intestines. In other words, when the devil's weed was tops, brujos used to go on special hunting trips to get fat from wild boars. They sought the biggest and the strongest males. They had a special magic for wild boars. They took from them a special power, so special that it is hard to believe even in those days. That it was hard to believe even in those days. But that power is lost. I don't know anything about it, as I don't know any man who knows about it. Perhaps the weed herself will teach you all that. Don Juan measured a handful of lard, dumped it into the bowl containing the dry gruel, and scraped the lard left on his hand onto the edge of the pot. He told me to stir the contents until they were smooth and thoroughly mixed. I whipped the mixture for nearly 3 hours. Don Juan looked at it from time to time and thought it was not done yet. Finally, he seemed satisfied. The air whipped into the paste had given it a light gray color and the consistency of jelly. He hung the bowl from the roof next to the other bowl. He said he was going to leave it there until the next day because it would take 2 days to prepare this second portion. He told me not to eat anything in the meantime. I could have water, but no food at all. The next day, Thursday, July 4th, Don Juan directed me to leach the root 4 times. By the last time I poured the water out of the bowl, it had already become dark. We sat on the porch. We put both bowls in front of him. The root extract measured a teaspoon of whitest starch. He put it into a cup and added water. He rotated the cup in his hand to dissolve the substance, then handed the cup to me. He told me to drink all that was in the cup. I drank it fast and then put the cup on the floor and slumped back. My heart began to pound. I felt I could not breathe. Don Juan ordered me, matter-of-factly, to take off all of my clothes. I asked him why, and he said I had to rub myself with the paste. I hesitated. I did not know whether to undress. Don Juan urged me to hurry up. He said there was very little time to fool around. I removed my clothes. He took his bone stick and cut 2 horizontal lines on the surface of the paste, thus dividing the contents of the bowl into 3 equal parts. Then, starting at the center of the top line, he cut a vertical line perpendicular to the other 2, dividing the paste into 5 parts. He pointed to the bottom right-hand area and said that was for my left foot. The area above it was for my left leg. The top and largest part was for my genitals. The next one below on the left side was for my right leg, and the area at the bottom left was for my right foot. He told me to apply the part of the paste designated for my left foot to the sole of my foot and rub it thoroughly. Then he guided me in applying the paste on the inside of my whole left leg, on my genitals, down the inside of my right leg, and finally on the sole of my feet. I followed his directions. The paste was cold and had a particularly strong odor. When I had finished applying it, I straightened up. The smell from the mixture entered my nostrils. It was suffocating me. The pungent odor was actually choking me. It was like a gas of some sort. I tried to breathe through my mouth and tried to talk to Don Juan, but I couldn't. Don Juan kept staring at me. I took a step toward him. My legs were rubbery and long, extremely long. I took another step. My knee joints felt springy, like a vault pole. They took and vibrated and contracted elastically. There we go. I moved forward. The motion of my body was slow and shaky. It was more like a tremor, forward and up. I looked down and saw Don Juan sitting below me, way below me. The momentum carried me forward one more time, which was even more elastic and longer than the preceding one. From there I soared. I remember coming down once. Then I pushed up with both feet, sprang backward, and glided on my back. I saw the dark sky above me, the clouds going by me. I jerked my body so I could look down. I saw the dark mass of mountains. My speed was extraordinary. My arms were fixed, folded against my sides. My head was the directional unit. If I kept it bent backward, I made vertical circles. I changed directions by turning my head to the side. I enjoyed such freedom and swiftness as I had never known before. The marvelous darkness gave me a feeling of sadness, of longing. Perhaps it was as if I had found a place where I belonged, the darkness of the night. I tried to look around, but all I sensed was that the night was serene, and yet it held so much power. Suddenly I knew it was time to come down. It was as if I had been given an order I had to obey. I began to descend like a feather with lateral motions. That type of movement made me very ill. It was slow and jerky, as though I were being lowered by pulleys. I got sick. My head was bursting with the most excruciating pain. A kind of blackness enveloped me. I was very aware of the feeling of being suspended in it. The next thing I remember was the feeling of waking up. I was in my bed, in my room. I sat up, and the image of my room dissolved. I stood up. I was naked. The motion of standing made me sick again. I recognized some of the landmarks. I was about a half a mile from Don Juan's house, near the place of his datura plants. Suddenly everything fit into place, and I realized that I would have to walk all the way back to his house naked. To be deprived of clothes was a profound psychological disadvantage, but there was nothing I could do to solve the problem. I thought of making myself a skirt of branches, but the thought seemed ludicrous, and besides, it was soon going to be dawn, for the morning twilight was already clear. I forgot about my discomfort and my nausea and started to walk toward the house. I was obsessed with the fear of being discovered. I watched for people and dogs. I tried to run, but I hurt my feet on the small, sharp stones. I walked slowly. It was already very clear. Then I saw somebody coming up the road, and quickly I jumped behind the bushes. My situation seemed so incongruous to me. A moment before I had been enjoying the unbelievable pleasure of flying, and the next minute I found myself hiding and embarrassed by my own nakedness. I thought of jumping out on the road again and running with all my might past the person who was coming. I thought he would be so startled that by the time he realized I was naked, I would have left him far behind. I thought all that, but I did not dare move. The person coming up the road was just upon me and stopped walking. I heard him calling my name. It was Don Juan, and he had my clothes. As I put them on, he looked at me and laughed. He laughed so hard that I wound up laughing too. The same day, Friday, July 5th, late in the afternoon, Don Juan asked me to narrate the details of my experience. As carefully as I could, I related the whole experience. The second portion of the devil's weed is used to fly, he said, when I finished. The unguent by itself is not enough. My benefactor said that it is the root that gives direction and wisdom, and it is the cause of the flying. As you learn more and take it often in order to fly, you will begin to see everything with great clarity. You can soar through the air for hundreds of miles to see what is happening in any place you want, or you can deliver a fatal blow to your enemies far away. As you become familiar with the devil's weed, she will teach you how to do such thing. For instance, she has taught you already how to change directions, and in the same manner, she will teach you unimaginable things. Like what, Don Juan? That I can't tell you. Every man is different. My benefactor never told me what he had learned. He told me how to proceed, but never what he saw. That is only for oneself. But I tell you all I see, Don Juan. Now you do. Later you will not. Next time you take the devil's weed, you will do it by yourself, around your own plants, because that is where you will land, around your own plants. Remember that. That is why I came down here to my plants, to look for you. He said nothing more, and I fell asleep. When I woke up in the evening, I felt invigorated. For some reason, I exuded a sort of physical contentment. I was happy, satisfied. Don Juan asked me, "Did you like the night, or was it frightful?" I told him that the night was truly magnificent. "How about your headache? Was it very bad?" he asked. The headache was as strong as all the other feelings. It was the worst pain I have ever had, I said. Would that keep you from wanting to taste the power of the devil's weed again?" "I don't know. I don't want it now, but later I might. I really don't know, Don Juan." There was a question I wanted to ask him. I knew he was going to evade it, so I waited for him to mention the subject. I waited all day. Finally, before I left that evening, I had to ask him, "Did I really fly, Don Juan?" "That is what you told me, didn't you?" "I know, Don Juan. I mean, did my body fly? Did I take off like a bird?" "You always ask questions I cannot answer. You flew. That is what the second portion of the devil's weed is for. As you take more of it, you will learn how to fly perfectly. It is not a simple matter. A man flies with the help of the second portion of the devil's weed. That is all I can tell you. What you want to know makes no sense. Birds fly like birds, and a man who takes the devil weed flies as such." "As birds fly?" "No, he flies as a man who has taken the devil's weed." "Then I didn't really fly, Don Juan. I flew in imagination, in my mind alone. Where was my body?" "In the bushes," he replied cuttingly, but immediately broke into laughter again. "The trouble with you is that you understand things in only one way. You don't think a man flies. And yet a brujo can move 1,000 miles in 1 second to see what is going on. He can deliver a blow to his enemies long distances away. So does he or does he not fly?" "You see, Don Juan, you and I are differently orientated. Suppose, for the sake of argument, one of my fellow students had been here with me when I took the devil's weed. Would he have been able to see me flying?" There you go again with your questions about what would happen if. It is useless to talk that way. If your friend or anybody else takes the second portion of the devil's weed, all he can do is fly. Now, if he had simply watched you, he might have seen you flying, or he might not. That depends on the man. But what I mean, Don Juan, is that if you and I look at a bird and see it fly, we agree that it is flying. But if two of my friends had seen me flying as I did last night, would they have agreed that I was flying? Well, they might have. You agree that birds fly because you have seen them flying. Flying is a common thing with birds. But you will not agree on other things birds do because you never seen birds doing them. If your friends knew about men flying with the devil's weed, then maybe they would agree. Let's put it another way, Don Juan. What I meant to say is that if I had tied myself to a rock with a heavy chain, I would have flown just the same because my body had nothing to do with my flying. Don Juan looked at me incredulously. "If you tie yourself to a rock," he said, "I'm afraid you will have to fly holding the rock with its heavy chain." End of chapter.